So I've played Warframe a lot, like a lot. Since its release in 2013, I've created multiple accounts over the game's lifetime, and in every single one of those accounts, I've encountered the same problem at a very specific point in the game. It's something I'm sure many of you can relate to, particularly those who are trying to quote-unquote complete the game without investing any real money into it. We're going to dub this phenomenon the Warframe wall, but it goes without saying that a number of free-to-play games also have their own walls. Essentially, you hit the wall when the next stage of progression in the game becomes so seemingly tedious and mind-numbing that you begin to lose interest. This is generally understandable for free-to-play games, as the developers have to make money somehow, and for a lot of players, when they hit the wall, the easiest way to progress is to splash out a bit on new gear, thereby cutting down the time you would have needed to farm it up. Figuring out where this wall actually sits in Warframe is quite tricky due to the nature of the game, but this video is going to aim to provide guidance to players who feel like they might be approaching the wall and what methods and tactics you can use to break through it without spending any in real life currency. It's worth noting here that everything functional within Warframe, i.e. equipment that actually serves a function like warframes, weapons, companions and so on, is gainable without having to spend IRL currency. There is even a plethora of in-game cosmetics that can be also gained without having to spend IRL currency. In fact, with the exception of a few time-locked items such as Excalibur Prime and so on, you can unlock everything in the game free of charge except for Tenogen skins, which, although they may make you look cool, are not an integral part of the game. So where are you most likely to encounter the wall? Well, to make this a bit easier to understand, we're going to break this down into mastery ranks, which are Warframe's character levels and, although not strictly accurate, provide a certain insight into a player's progress in the game. I say not strictly accurate because you can technically pick up a lot of gear and mods without actually having to level up, but there are benefits to ranking up, particularly since the developers added some very nice benefits to reaching MR30, including Umbral Former, Legendary Cores, and access to Daily Blessings, which can improve your resource gain, affinity gain, and damage. As is the case with most free-to-play games, the average MR of players in Warframe sits very low. This comes down to players trying out the game and deciding it's not for them, which is fair enough as Warframe's playstyle is quite unique and won't suit everyone. So for the purposes of this video, we're going to look at players who get past this point and continue the game past the very first few story missions. Now, having access to 4 accounts, all of which have a pretty hefty friends list now that span a few years, I can put together a little graph and see what kind of ranks the people I've played with have gotten to. You'll notice that the graph is somewhat skewed towards players at higher mastery ranks. Now that does speak to some extent to the people I usually play with, but we can still draw a few conclusions from this. First thing to note is that a lot of players, particularly those from my older accounts, have been offline for months, sometimes years, and so their mastery rank is locked in, if you will. The majority of the higher ranked players are actually still playing. So what we're looking for here are the ranks that players tend to stop at before that point, and immediately we can see a clumping of players around the MR 18 to 22 mark. To me, from my experience at least, this is a bit late for a wall. When I've done my previous accounts, and indeed my Warframe Done Efficiently series, I seem to hit it around MR 13 to MR 15, but that being said, that could speak to the sort of people I've added to my friends list, who are a bit more into the game than your average player. But let me know what you guys think of where the wall might land for you. So what we've now established is where the wall might be. I think it's important now to know who builds the wall. As we've already said, without the wall, the developers probably wouldn't make enough money to actually run the game, so it is important that it exists, but there is a difference between a wall built of difficulty and a wall built of complexity, and unfortunately, Warframe's wall leans more towards complexity, and what I mean by that is that the structure of the game often leaves players thinking, well, what do I do now? One goal that seems out of reach is not nearly as bad as 5 or 6, and is often talked about in the Warframe community. It is hard to pin down what actually constitutes these final goals, or endgame. As Warframe has evolved over the years, the developers have obviously had to release new content, not only to keep existing players interested, but to also attract new players. The problem with this is that although Warframe does have a main storyline, so to speak, there are a number of branching missions and objectives that aren't completed if you were to just follow this storyline and do nothing else. Furthermore, the constant introduction of new weapons and gear makes it difficult for newer players to know which weapons to aim for when progressing, or even where to get them in some cases. In my opinion, and it is just that, Warframe seems to lack cohesion, and to a lot of players the number of different routes and things to collect within the game can be very overwhelming. Alongside a smattering of other small factors like various bugs, this is generally why players hit the wall and stop playing. Fortunately, there are a number of tools available to help players struggling to break through the wall. The first one I generally point players towards is the Warframe wiki. Weirdly, not a lot of players use this, but it has a lot of information to help people progress through the game. Now, being a fan-made wiki, the information is not always 100% accurate and is being updated all the time. But for general queries about pretty much anything in the game, it's the place to go. A lot of the questions that I get asked in the comments section could be answered with a simple search on the wiki. The second piece of advice I would give would be to stop viewing platinum as some special premium currency, but view it as a resource instead. It can be farmed, like any other resource, through a number of methods, and I spoke about a few of them on my channel, but I'll leave a link to that down in the description below. The point is that whenever you're struggling to farm a weapon, or a frame, or a mod, or you're getting impatient waiting for something to craft in the foundry, go gather up some platinum. Funnily enough, there's quite a few items in the game that can be gained faster just by farming the platinum for it. Now, a lot of people are probably thinking, well, this is a waste of platinum, you're better off spending it on weapon slots or reactors or whatever. And that's largely due to the mentality of thinking of platinum as this premium currency. There's not a limit of how much you can gather up. So before starting a long and tedious farm, wonder if it would be faster to actually farm the platinum for it. Another piece of advice I can give is find a community. Warframe is better played in a group, and you can progress much faster if you've got a squad to roll with. Join a clan, a Discord server, whatever. They can give you in-game help, provide you with quick advice, and generally make the game more enjoyable. The final piece of advice I'd give players struggling with the wall is to take a moment to pinpoint exactly what you want. When I first started playing Warframe, there was nowhere near the content that exists in the game today, both in terms of missions, gear, and mechanics. I remember joining public squads and looking at the gear that other players had and how they used it, and then if it looked cool to me, I'd make it my mission to get it. Back then, there wasn't any endgame, it was just a rotating cycle of dishing out as much destruction as possible and looking cool whilst doing it. Now that the game has developed further, players have options of where they want to get into the game. So here I'm going to list out some options of what kind of player you want to be in the endgame. I'll start with my endgame, which is eidolon hunting. Not just capturing them though, getting better at hunting them faster, more efficiently. It also acts as my platinum income as well, which is nice. Another endgame could be endurance. How long can you survive in endless missions? How many resources can you gather up in that time? How many kills can you get? Looking cool is definitely another endgame, or fashion frame as it's commonly known, sometimes considered the quote-unquote true endgame. In my experience, looking cool in-game does help you keep going. For those of you who watched my Warframe Done Efficiently series, you'll know that after a while, we did invest in some colour schemes early on just to keep things fresh and keep us occupied. The final endgame I'm going to bring up is min-maxing. Look to make everything as good as it can be, and make it perform as good as it can as well. Essentially, this is now what my Warframe Done Efficiently playthrough has become, to pick a frame and 3 weapons each week and gear them to the maximum. But these are all just suggestions. You guys make your own endgames and make them suited to your playstyle. So there you have it. That's my take on the current state of Warframe and the kind of mindset I employ when playing the game. I do just quickly want to reiterate that last point about making the game your own. If you'd excuse the language here, don't take shit from anyone who says that one build is better than another. If you are happy playing the frames, weapons, and builds that you have, then carry on. Whatever makes you comfortable or happy playing the game is the right way to play it. Even in some of my videos, I've called things the quote-unquote best build for something, and caused a bit of a stir with a few viewers, but more often than not I will say it's my personal preference as well. There's also many different ways you can measure how good, in quotation marks again, something is, i.e. are you building for speed, comfort, or perhaps you're on a budget or restricted by your mastery rank? The point is, and as I've said, play Warframe how you want to. Sure, you can get tips and tricks from videos like mine or the wiki, but at the end of the day, it's whatever floats your boat that you should stick to. The most important thing is to be considerate to other players and not belittle those who you think are playing the game wrong, again, in quotation marks. And that brings us to the end of this little chat. If you guys have your own ideas or points of view on this, do be sure to leave them down in the comments below, and if you enjoyed the video or indeed any of my videos, then be sure to leave a like and subscribe, and I will catch you in the next one.